All right, open your Bibles to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 tonight, the book of 1 Thessalonians and chapter number 4. I'm going to be speaking on the subject, exercise that matters. Exercise that matters. 1 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse number 8, or verse 7 to 9, excuse me. But refuse profane and old wives' tales, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness. For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things, having promise of the life that now is, and of that which is to come. This is a faithful saying, and worthy of all acceptation. So this was something that was passed around, and this was something that was a very well-known statement. Of course, we have many of those in Christian circles today. But this is stressing the importance of a godly life. And so, first of all, in verse 7, Timothy is charged by the Apostle Paul to refuse profane and old wives' tales. Now, this is not talking, the word profane is not relating to blasphemous stuff. It's relating to things that weren't in relation to piety, to religion, to things that really mattered. And he says, old wives' tales. Just like in this time, back then, in that time, there was a lot of superstition. And there were a lot of things that circulated around. There were fables, stories, and these things taught principles or taught conclusions or things that were not true and were not good. We as God's people cannot embrace the philosophies and the culture of our day. And just because something sounds cutesy, it says old wives' fables, okay? Women had a platform and were respected, and they were the matriarchs of a lot of homes back then. So these sayings and statements that they made were not something that he said he wanted them to exercise and to be a part of. Basically what he's saying is don't give any time to it. They're a waste of time. Don't engage in that. He says, but refuse profane and old wives' fables, and exercise thyself rather unto godliness. So don't waste your time and energy going down all these rabbit trails that people deal with and getting caught up in all of these things that are just superstition and really are things that are not biblical. People do that a lot. And we're living in a culture that is caught up in all kinds of stuff. We're not going to go into all the wives' tales of today. Like a stitch in nine saves time, or whatever, things like that. These were things that were more pagan. These were things that were things that would reflect, or would contradict biblical truth. And so he says, stay away from them. Don't give your time and energy. And he says in verse 8, for bodily exercise profiteth little. Now he's not talking about lifting weights here. He's not talking about jogging. He's not talking about pushing yourself away from the table and going to the gym. Okay? He's talking about bodily exercise profiting little. We'll go in just a minute to Colossians chapter 3. There are a lot of things that people did in that time, back in those cultures, to their bodies as a means of will worship, a way of trying to act spiritual, look spiritual, that were not profitable. Okay? And there were some things that might help the health of somebody to a degree, but that, he said, had little profit. It didn't say there wasn't any profit, but it had little profit, and it was not something that they were to spend a lot of time or engage a lot in. Let me put it in the modern vernacular. It's not my job to tell you how to eat. It's not my job to talk about, to go on a health bench. Okay, our bodies are going to die, and as long as we're not doing anything sinful, then if you want to have a snack or have a treat or have something like that, I don't regulate that, and I don't deal with that from the pulpit. And you can do all you want to regulate your health, and I'm not against health. I'm doing some things even now, but I don't talk about those things because I don't want you to feel like you have to do what I do, and I definitely don't want to do what you do on some things. Okay, meaning that everybody's got their own ideas of what works for them and what health with their bodies. But at a certain point, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, what's the point? I remember, and I'll never forget this. What's that?
You can do that many?
Yeah. I would be lucky right now if I could do 10, okay? I'll never forget this. I remember one time being in a pastor's school, and there was a great preacher. I don't even remember his name, but I do remember this. I remember he was 77 years old, and the reason why I remember that specifically is a statement he made. He said, if you go to the grocery store, and he said, you look at everything, he said, they tell you, health-wise, stay away from preservatives. And he says, everything, there's preservatives in almost everything that we eat. And he said, at 77, he said, I need all the preservatives I can get. And I love that. I thought, to me, that was hilarious, okay? And so, physically, what we are to concentrate on, our focus should not be on the physical things of life. Our purpose and our goal and our life should be spent in exercise that matters. You could lift 500 pounds. You could be the fastest man in the world, but at a certain point, there's going to be somebody that's going to break your record. There's going to be somebody that's going to lift more than you. Those are not things that count for eternity. He's not going to give an award when we stand before Him one day with how fast you ran. He's not going to give an award out when we stand at the Bema seat for who was most consistent on the scale. Okay, who managed their weight the best all their life. He's not going to care how many baskets you shot. He's not going to care how much you could lift. He's really not going to care. Those things are not going to matter because the body is temporary. He told Adam and Eve, if you sin, you're going to die. Your body begins to decay the moment you come into the world. There's a fine line between being foolish with your body and being unhealthy and being a steward of your vehicle and giving yourself some longevity of life. I get that, okay? Our society right now is really concerned about obesity. So much so, I don't know if you heard this week, that the American Medical Association actually, and this is no joke, they have now labeled obesity as a disease. I am not kidding you. And so they are going to, I guess, implement medications so 70% of the American public that is obese is going to be able to go to the doctor and is going to be able to be treated for a disease that they call obesity. We're driving a bus. My eyes were opened. I went to one of the principals and I said, what would it, would it be okay if I gave like a treat? I went and got some candy for the kids that rode my bus as a motivation. Well, he said, no, not really. He says, we are allowed to have 3 sugar days for the entire year. 3. So we have to choose the days that we can have cake or cookies or sweets the entire year. And I was going to have Linda maybe make some cupcakes or do something. No. Now, when I was a kid, I had snacks every day. I look at kids today, and it's like we in society have gotten so out of whack that we want to dictate to people how they live. And everything that they do, our government wants to control and wants to stop people, and that's what we're concerned about. Never mind we teach them about morality. Never mind that we teach them about Christ. Never mind that we deal with discipline. We're focused on things seriously that do not matter. And Christian people do that too. They get sidetracked with things that have no bearing on eternity. I'm glad I didn't grow up in this generation. I'm glad I was able to have pudding or a Hostess cupcake or donuts or whatever, and I turned out okay. I've made it to 53, and I don't do that every day. People think that I should be 400 pounds, and if I ate like I could, I would be. Okay, my wife, she's a baker. She does, but I don't. So I try to keep that all in perspective. But at the same time, you can take all fun out of life, and you can get out of balance and out of whack. And so it's important for you to understand that godliness, exercising yourself to godliness, is far more profitable. Verse 8, he says, "For bodily exercise profiteth little, but godliness is profitable unto all things." That's an interesting statement. Because godliness, if you think about it, if you live like the Lord, you try to be godly, that transcends into every area of your life. The Bible talks, let me give you an example. Go to the book of Proverbs, okay? Proverbs chapter 2. And I want you to start hold on, it's Proverbs 3. So we'll start with verse 5. "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him." Now could we draw the conclusion, in all thy ways, that means every aspect of your life. Everything you do. What did Paul say? "Whether ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do, do all to the glory of God." That is exercising yourself rather unto godliness. So you're taking even practical things of life and you are doing it from God's perspective or in a godly way. So now let's look at what the next verses say. "In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths." Verse 7. "Be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord, and depart from evil." Again, continuing to think about the godliness. Now look in verse 8. "It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the firstfruits of all thine increase." So, the Bible is saying here that if we exercise ourselves to godliness, God will do things with our health. If you are living godly and you keep yourself from worry, You keep yourself from anger, from bitterness. You forgive. You love. You're patient. You're kind. You're forbearing. That affects your health. You feel better. You live better. And so it's important to keep every aspect of your life into consideration. Now let's go back to our text. Go back to 1 Timothy chapter 4. He says, "But godliness is profitable unto all things." So let's look at the areas that affects. Okay? We know that if we serve the Lord, we have peace. Okay, so what would peace affect physically? And what would peace affect in your life? Blood pressure? Okay. Good. So what? Sleep. You know the Bible, did you know the Bible uses the expression sweet sleep? What's that? It means you grab a piece of chocolate before you go to bed? No. That's not a bad thing. I've done that, but chocolate keeps me awake, so that probably wouldn't be good in my case. But sweet sleep comes from serving the Lord and having the peace of God which passes all understanding. So you can get the rest. You can